And with that, we welcome you into another episode of the Marriage Talk Podcast. It is great to have you with us as we get ready to explore another important topic that will pertain directly to your relationships, to your marriages. And today is one that I can guarantee you have not mastered. And if you have, where's your book? Because we all need to be reading it. Bill Hobson here alongside Jay and Laura LaFoon. And as we dive into today's topic, I can't think of a better way to start it than with this famous soundbite from Cool Hand Luke.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Failure to communicate, which seems to be, Jay and Laura, seems to be something that every couple struggles with in some way, shape, or form. How many times have you dealt with it in all your years of marriage ministry?
3 minutes ago.
We don't struggle, Bill. It's a lifestyle for us. Lack of communication is not a struggle. It's a lifestyle. Come on.
But it's not lack. We communicate.
We
It's
over
just,
communicate.
what are we communicating about? And how are we communicating? Because someone, I won't name names, has tone of voice issues, which makes communicating very difficult.
Well, and someone, I won't name names, but she's left-handed and everything comes out of her mouth backwards. So when she says turn right, she really means turn left.
That is true. I'll give you that. I say
Well,
things.
This could be awkward if you guys were to start naming names. So I'm glad that you're protecting the innocent. And
We'll try not.
I was trying to think of all of the events that you've done over all the years where you have hundreds of married couples in these gatherings. And I'm guessing that every single time you get together in some form, communication takes center stage. I mean, is that the biggest challenge for marriages?
When we talk about challenges in marriage, we talk about the big three, and that's money, intimacy, and family. But those are all wrapped in arguably the biggest one, which is communication. We're not communicating about money well. We're not communicating about sex well. We're not communicating about boundaries with our family well. And so communication is, or lack thereof, is interwoven in every aspect of your marriage, whether it be healthy communication, daily communication, or poor communication. It's one of the challenges because God, in his infinite wisdom, made us different. And that we communicate differently as well.
Not sure why he did that, but
well, we have found, and yes, so at all of our events, whether it's celebrate your marriage, right, celebrate your marriage up at Grand Hotel or our date nights, communication is always one of the key factors because guaranteed 90% of the people on the way to the event had some sort of communication breakdown. I can guarantee it, and I'm going to tell you why I believe that. Because Satan knows they're going to something that's going to help their marriage, and Satan doesn't want that. So he's going to drive wedges in where he can. And, I just think that's the case. I know that's the case for us. We know we're going to have a great event when in the days and hours beforehand, we're at each other's throat. You know what I'm saying? We're not communicating well.
Every once in a while, we are provided with these visual reminders or cues that some couple may be struggling with communication. And I'm reminded of the scene that plays itself out at Grand Hotel every visit I make there, and probably the same for you guys. You'll look around the dining room and once in a while, you'll see a guy wearing a blue blazer with a big GH crest on the left breast, which means he forgot his jacket and they loaned him one because dinner time at Grand Hotel is a formal dress time. And then he's wearing a tie that has little carriages on it, which means that also was loaned to him. And that also means when you kind of do the math, if you extrapolate backwards from how they ended up here, at some point, he said to his wife, "Did you pack my jacket?" Or when they got to the room, she said to him, "I told you 17 times you've got to pack your own jacket," right? So sometimes you get these poignant reminders of what happens when communication breaks down. But then other times you don't get it that obviously. Instead, you get to see a couple in some other setting where they're just angry at each other. And the arms are folded, the eyes are rolling. and you can tell that there has been a failure to communicate, as we just heard a moment ago. What do you want to say to the couples that are kind of in that space right now?
You're not alone. You're not alone. Laura and I have spent most of our entire marriage working together in ministry. We have focused the last 26 years on marriage. And one of our best stories is about miscommunication. We're in Fort Wayne, Indiana, getting ready to do a Celebrate Your Marriage conference at a hotel, a really nice hotel in Fort Wayne. And there were problems with the sound system. The sound check was not going smoothly. I think it was our first event of that year. And every year, what we do is we create new content every year for the event. So we had not yet performed that. So we were a little on edge there.
A little stressed.
And Laura and I, while all the sound people are setting up, we're on stage and we're having a rather vociferous disagreement.
What does that word mean?
Very vocal,
Okay.
very vocal. We weren't whispering and we weren't shooting darts with our eyes. No, we were talking loudly.
Because
And
I was blaming the sound guy. Jay was blaming me. No one was blaming Jay. Of course not. He wouldn't be the crux of the problem at all. But
anyway, Laura threw off her headset microphone, threw it on the stage and said, "Fine, do it by yourself then." And without missing a beat, I said, "It'll be better that way anyway."
Oh. No.
So to those of you that are struggling with communication, you are not alone. Okay.
communication is an issue for every marriage. And, it's not something that you ever attain. You might attain glimpses
Moments.
of 10 seconds of, ooh, we just had a really good communication moment. You heard what I said what I meant to say, but it's a constant struggle. And you can have some tools that help you make those moments last longer. But it's never anything that any married couple will ever attain. And if they say they have, like you said in the beginning, Bill, if you've said you've communicated, you've got it.
Where's the book?
Where's the book? Because none of us have it.
Well, and part of that is our observation. We have no empirical data for this. It's simply our observation is that men and women talk about different things. Men in general like to talk about facts and activities. That's why there's so many guys that can name, the batting average of every Tiger that's playing. It's a fact. It's about an activity. Women in general, again, very general, like to talk about people and feelings. And for men, we don't talk about feelings. That's just not because we don't have them very often. And when we do, we have very deep feelings. That's why men have anger issues and things like that, is because we don't feel all the time, but when we do feel, we feel deeply. But women, they feel all the time. And so that's what they want to talk about, is how they're feeling at the moment when we're just
At this moment, not the next moment, just this moment right here.
Because it's going to change. I guarantee you, it's going to change how she feels. So that in and of itself makes it very difficult. I'll never forget, I came back from, I had an opportunity to go pheasant hunting in South Dakota. Amazing, amazing time. And here were the questions Laura asked when I got back. What did it feel like to kill a bird? I'm like, it felt great because I knew I was going to be eating it that evening for dinner. And then the second question was, what did everybody wear?
To be fair to me, those do sound like ridiculous questions, but he had never been hunting at all
Ever.
in his life. And we had to spend 2 hours at a sporting goods store in order to get him the right clothing to wear. So that's why I asked, what did everybody?
In other words, she was asking, did I fit in? Because you would feel bad.
Steve had on a lovely evening gown, and it was, I'm curious about those moments when it blows up and it doesn't go well. You mentioned the Fort Wayne example. Take us back to that moment for a second. And how did you come out of it? Because I'm assuming that evening you did your show together. It wasn't maybe it was a solo act, but at some point, one of the two of you had to say, "Okay, I didn't do real well at that. I'm sorry." How did it play out? What was the aftermath like?
That particular incident, I did leave the
Room.
stage. I left the auditorium. I went up to our room and our room actually had like a green room attached to it. And so I was in the green room watching TV, and he came up, I don't know how long ago, how much longer after me he came up, and we both just kind of sat there
On the literally on the
other
opposite ends
ends.
of the couch.
And in addition to us at this Celebrate Your Marriage, we had a friend of ours who's a comedian, and he actually came into the green room not knowing what was going on.
He
And
took one look at us and said, I'm out of here.
I'm leaving, and got out of here. And when he did that, it caused us to laugh, and we both apologized. We have in our miscommunications, we do kind of come down off the ledge. Now, we haven't always done that. Early on in our marriage, I came from a family of screamers, and Jay came a family.
He has a PhD in shrill.
I do.
You know?
I have the shrill. And Jay came from a family of, we just don't talk about
Avoiders.
it. We're just going to avoid it. And so early on in our marriage, I'm like, we're going to have this argument, and we're going to have it. It's going to be good. And I'm going to scream and yell at you, and I'm going to make you say something to me. But we have learned each other's conflict style, and knowing what to do and when to do it and how to do it. And so we do, because of our personalities, we do spend a lot of time just after the heated moment, kind of laughing that was just a ridiculous argument that we got into, which is exactly what happened in Fort Wayne, that I would blame the sound guy, that he would blame me. I mean, I had nothing to do with the sound. So Jay blaming me, that wasn't working. So it was really just kind of
so it really is our friends, Terry and David, or was it Michael and Amy? I don't know. We've got friends
Michael and Amy
who were talking about, it's okay to take a timeout. You look at sports teams. Things aren't going well right now, folks. Let's take a timeout. And this isn't like a 2-day timeout. This is, let's take
10 minutes,
15 minutes and just go to separate rooms, breathe deeply, and think about what just happened. And boy, it's a wonderful thing to go, okay, let me get my head wrapped around this. Let me calm down. Let's get the emotion out of it. What really took place there? Because we remind couples, you're each other's biggest fan. No one loves you more than your spouse. And sometimes that's not comforting, but other times it's like, okay, I do have to remember, they're not intentionally picking this fight, but something is causing the conflict. The good thing about conflict is this: the number one indicator of divorce is the habitual avoidance of conflict. When you conflict, it's because you care. And that's huge. And so that's one of the things that we constantly remember when we're bickering is, okay, what is it? What's the cause? What's the root? And is it legitimate? Is it a legitimate root cause, or is it?
And lots of times it's just what's going on in your day. I mean, right before we got on this podcast, we were bickering because I couldn't make this work and he couldn't make that work. And I kind of in the back of my mind went, okay, he just got off a stressful phone call. We just got a stressful text. This stuff is going on. I'm just going to keep doing what I think I'm supposed to do and figure this thing out, and just let him, simmer a little bit, and he'll calm down. And so as the spouse, when your spouse comes at you, whether, in a biting tone of voice or harsh words, maybe the first question is, okay, what else is going on here? Because I didn't really do anything. I'm just here. It's just my existence. And seeing as there's something that's going on in the peripheral here that's causing stress and causing the tone of voice or whatever it might be.
And one of the things we want to do with this podcast, Bill, is to give couples tools that will help them, not just talk about the issues or talk around the issues, but how do we get to some resolution of these issues? And when it comes to communication, and we'll beat this drum a number of times over the next however many years God lets us do this. One of our habits that we tell couples, you've got to build this habit into your marriage, is 15 minutes of uninterrupted conversation every day. And when I say that, most men's eyes glaze over. They're like, are you kidding me? Oh my, 15 whole minutes of uninterrupted conversation. And it's really interesting. By uninterrupted, we mean the television's not on. You don't have one of these phone things in your hand. You are face to face over a cup of coffee or a glass of iced tea. And you will be amazed at how much stress will dissipate when you do this. Because especially for the ladies, and again, I don't know how God did this, but he designed them they connect via conversation. This is how they connect. And so fellas, if you take 15 minutes a day to say, honey, I'm focused on you for this time, and then just ask an open-ended question, honey, tell me about your day. And then let her go, because she will, but you've got to stay engaged. It's got to listen. That 15 minutes will make your arguments about money start to go away. Your arguments about intimacy start to go away. Your arguments about family start to go away, because you begin to get on the same page when it comes to these issues. And when you're on the same page, the communication doesn't get easier, but it gets smoother. We're still going to have rough patches from time to time, but that 15 minutes really helps smooth things out.
Well, and I'm recalling now, back a few years ago in the early days of the Marriage Talk podcast with Terry Ladico, doing a series about communication, one of the points that he stressed, that I'm probably not going to be a student of the year when it comes to this, is that communication involves listening. It's not just a willingness to talk, but it's having somebody on the other end of it who's actively engaged in what you're saying. And so I'm glad you said, Jay, that it's uninterrupted, but it's also actively listening, like more than just being physically present in that conversation or in that moment. It wouldn't kill us to ask a couple follow-up questions like, oh, well, I didn't see that coming. How did that go? Or what do you mean this person did that? Or that sounds.
I had an 8-year-old tell me this: listening is wanting to hear.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, an 8-year-old. And it was just like, oh my gosh, you're right.
An 8-year-old.
I hear you is one thing, but I want to hear you. That's listening. And
and it's really easy. I remember when I was in college and I was taking counseling courses, I was going to get my major in counseling and decided no, because I was going to take another 2 years because I switched my major. I remember them saying, there's ways that you can show that you're listening. There's words that you can say, so what I hear you saying is, or tell me more about that. I'm trying to understand exactly what it is you're saying. So give me more information. I mean, you can say it, don't say them like that, because then it sounds like you're so
psychoanalyzing your spouse. No, we don't want that.
But think of those questions. And I think this failure to communicate is the fact that we don't have this habit in our marriages of sitting and just talking. And so then when something happens, when we get stressed and an incident happens, and then the screaming and the yelling starts, we don't have those tools in our back pocket because we haven't sat down and communicated for 15 minutes every day. Whereas if you build that habit into your life, then you're in the habit of just talking. And then when something happens, you can use a different tone of voice to say, okay, let's just stop here for a second and take a break and let's come back to it. And
the classic one is, you didn't tell me we're having dinner with your parents tonight. I told you 5 times this week we're having parents with my dinner.
Having parents with your dinner.
My parents with my dinner. Yeah. Having dinner with my, because it's those things. When she said it, if I didn't want to hear it, I didn't remember it, so I really didn't listen. And so it is that concentrated effort. And you don't have to be married long to realize that there are things that when you're in love just kind of happen naturally. When you are love to each other, it takes work. It takes some work.
Thinking about those little moments of nuclear explosion that can happen when couples are communicating. And to me, they often pop up in the form of superlatives. Always, never, worst, best, right? These things that are so extreme, they couldn't possibly be true. Nobody always does something. It just doesn't happen. And nobody never does something. But in those moments of explosiveness and some temper or some frustration and stress, you can break out these little nuclear bombs that, as far as I can tell, immediately put an end to effective, loving communication until that moment's dealt with, right? Always and never. I'm going to have you guys speak to the extreme superlatives of always and never.
I'm the queen of superlatives.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you
It's a
for
crown.
I'm always you never do this. You never. He'll just go, because we've had this discussion on a calmer level that I always use superlatives. So then when I do it in the heat of the moment, he'll stop and go, so I never put the dishes away. And then I hear and he doesn't do it in a, well, maybe sometimes he does.
condescending way.
Condescending way. But then I hear it and I'm like, oh yeah, right. Well, maybe never's not the right word, but yes, trying to stay away from those always, never.
And then there's,
and it's hard.
and then there's
try.
phrases that are one of Laura's famous phrases when she would do something for the 18th time. And I asked her 17 times before not to do it. Well, I didn't know it was a federal offense. Well, no, it's not, again, how do you back out of that one? Oh yeah, we're going to send you to jail for not making the bed or whatever,
The FBI is coming.
Yeah, so she would just totally diffuse any discussion with this absurd statement of, I didn't know it was a federal offense.
At least I was trying to have a discussion.
Yeah.
Well, that reminds me, Jay, that you need to at least make friends with somebody who is an FBI agent so that you can arrange with them at the right moment to come knock on the door wearing their windbreaker.
Yes, it is a federal.
I understand somebody here has not put the dishes in the dishwasher. You have the right to remain silent. Now that would be good, a federal offense.
Oh yeah. The sometimes, I mean, the never, the always, it's so unfair, and that's one of the things that we talk to couples about. And I don't like this first word, but fighting fair, disagreeing in a fair manner, arguing in a fair manner, because so often we don't want to lose the argument. So we turn to tactics that are unfair. And the use of those words, they're devastating, because you suck all the oxygen out of the room as soon as you've said them, because there's no turning back from that. And
the problem is, at least for me, in my mind, he never puts away the dishes. In my mind, even though I know it's not true, but in the heat of the moment, I'm going to accuse him of that because I don't want to lose the argument. So you never help me put away the dishes. You never do this. You never do that. Even though I know that that's not a true statement. And so when you can have a discussion about, that's why that 15 minutes is so important to build as a habit into your life, even though, 95% of the time it might just be talking about your day, but there's going to be a 5 or 10% time that it's going to be, we have this issue that we need to discuss, and to have that 15-minute habit already in place takes away those nuclear times, that it lessens them. You're always going to have those moments of,
and it's inevitable, because when we get uncomfortable as human beings, we start looking for ways to gain comfort. And oftentimes we look at other people and think they're more comfortable at this moment than me. So I want to drag them into my discomfort. That happened to us this summer. It was super hot day, but it was the day that we had set aside to do all of our outdoor work. And so we're pulling weeds and we're spraying Roundup and we're doing, deadheading flowers. And I could tell Laura was just like, she was not happy. She was in a funk. She was just, and I'm like, what is wrong? And she said, well, I just feel like I'm doing all the work and you're just walking around spraying Roundup.
Because he was.
And I said to her, look at my shirt. I had sweat through like the third shirt of the day. And I'm like, you don't think I'm doing any work? And then she finally admitted, I guess it's just the middle child in me coming out thinking it's not fair. And I'm like, there we go.
I'm the one on my knees pulling the weeds, and I'm the one. What's it called? Pruning the salvia and deadheading the flowers. And he's just going.
So a lot of times our miscommunication comes out of discomfort. We're not happy. We're discomfort. We have discomfort. We want to cause discomfort to others.
You used the phrase fighting fair. And I'm also reminded of some lines that can be crossed in those moments that you didn't really mean, but that they will cut really deep. I have a very close friend whose marriage has been through an awful lot, and in large part because of some of the decisions that he has made. And now they're 4 or 5 years down the road in healing and working very, very hard at rebuilding the relationship. But when things get stressful or they get a little bit anxious, just on any topic, whether it's a project around the house or an expenditure or whatever it is, he will find that his past is suddenly thrown back at him in that heat of that argument. And he's asking me, he's like, how is that fair? When is that ever going to stop? And I, of course, being the complete rank amateur, said, I have no idea.
Right.
But there are some unfair tactics, or it's not really a tactic because that makes it sound planned, but some unfair exclamations or blurting out of something that you, as soon as those words, like Brian Regan talks about trying to get the words to come back in after you say something foolish.
The toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah, you can see them hanging out there in the ether, but they're not coming back in. And they are going right to the heart of your spouse. And they're hurting probably more than you even thought that they were. So let's talk for a moment about fighting fair versus fighting unfair.
Well, one of the phrases I used once, and I realized that it was such a pain point for my wife that I could never use it again, should never use it, shouldn't have used it in the first place, was, you're so much like your mother. Holy smokes. You know, and it, as soon, again, I didn't do it. I hadn't planned it, hadn't, you know, malice aforethought was not there, but I said it. And as soon as I did, I saw the hurt. Not because her mom is a bad person. Her mom's a wonderful person, but she does not want to be compared to her mother. No woman does. And she especially doesn't want to be compared to my mother. You know what I'm saying? And so when you say those things, here's an illustration from golf. When you golf and you use an iron, you generally take a divot. A divot, for those of you that don't know, is a chunk of grass that comes out because you've hit down on the ball into the dirt. And if you replace that divot immediately, it will repair itself in 2 to 3 days. If that divot sits out for even an hour and then someone comes along later and replaces it, it takes up to a week for it to heal. And if it sits overnight, that divot takes 2 to 3 weeks to heal. And so what we like, when we make those unfair digs at our spouse, those unfair comments at our spouse, it's like taking a divot out of them. We're literally taking a chunk of flesh out of them, and you got to repair that right away. The sooner you can repair that, the better. You know it in your heart, you know it in your mind. And, you know, unless you're a really mean person, you're going to get checked on that. And you need to answer that check right away and say, I'm really
You need to apologize right away. And, you know, I'm really sorry that those words came out of my mouth. And again, it goes back to exploring yourself, why you're, you know, why are you so angry at whatever's going on? What is it we can't, I know what I'm trying to say, but it's not coming to my mind.
Oh, my father,
left-handed.
Yeah, my father had a saying, and this is probably where you're going: hurting people hurt people.
That's what I was trying to say.
and that really, especially as in marriage, when I'm hurting, again, I lash out, and who's closest usually gets the shrapnel. So,
and that's why that timeout when you're in the middle of an argument is really good, to just, you know, call the timeout. Let's take 5 minutes. Let's take 10 minutes, go to our separate corners, go to a different room, and have that time of introspection to figure out, what is it that is making me so angry right now? Is it something that he's actually done? Or is it something that's going on in my world around me right now that's making me angry? You know, am I tired? Am I hungry? Those, especially, you know, we have a saying in our house, hangry, because when Jay gets hungry, he gets angry and he will lash out. Doesn't mean that he's angry at me. He's just hungry, and it comes out as anger. And the same thing happened with our kids. And so we kind of, I know lots of people have used it. We used it for years, that, you know, are you hangry or are you really angry about something? No, I'm just hungry. Feed me. I'll be fine. And so really looking into yourself as far as what is making me,
what's the root cause?
So upset right now.
There's some mystery to why we are willing to say things to our spouses that we would never say to a coworker, a friend, or really anybody else that we come into contact with throughout the course of our lives. So why is it so hard for me to say to my wife, thank you? I don't know, but just a couple days ago, when she was part of a really cool family kind of effort to help renovate the studio that I'm sitting in, she was working pretty hard as well. And it really wasn't until it had finished and everybody had gone home, and I just thought, oh, wait a second. Thank you for what you did. And I have a hard time with those simple things, the simple courtesies, or the I'm sorry. I mean, it's, to use a really modern day contemporary example, Fonzie had a very hard time saying, I'm sorry. For those of you who are under the age of 40, you have no idea, maybe 45, but what is it about the barrier within our marriage relationships that makes the common courtesies uncommon?
I think so often we take each other for granted. We've been married almost 39 years. We've always been here. We're together a lot because we work together, we exercise together, we sleep together, we eat together.
Apparently that's what I prayed for early on, you know.
And so it becomes very easy that almost, I'll say that we, as married people, you do experience being one in many ways, shapes, and forms. But I think part of that, we're together all the time. We're a part of the same person, even though you're two individuals. You've come together and you are one, and you begin, well, they're just a part of me. They're an extension of me. So I just take them for granted that they're always here, that they know I mean thank you. They know that I mean I love you. They know
they should just know.
They should just know. But we don't take into consideration that they need to hear it. It's just like, we have a friend who says, when he stood at the altar with his wife, he told her he loved her, and he'll tell her every year on their anniversary, and the rest of time not, because she knows I love her. No, she needs to hear those words. And your spouse needs to hear thank you. Your spouse needs to hear I appreciate you. Your spouse needs to hear, wow, you look great today. Thank you for taking care of the kids. I love the way that you play with the kids and that you read the kids. That just builds, but we don't do it not out of spite. I think we don't do it out of ignorance. I think we're lazy.
I think we're lazy. And we get lazy in the relationship. Like Laura said, we take each other for granted, and we, it's like your favorite pair of jeans. You put them on, you wear them, you love them. And then all of a sudden they get a hole in them somewhere and you can't wear them anymore. And it's like, oh my goodness, why didn't I take better care of those? Those were my favorite pair of jeans. It's the same with your best friend, your spouse, is take care of that best friend like they are your best friend, and use it as, I don't want to say boot camp, but if you can learn to be that polite and that considerate with your spouse, imagine how that's going to magnify in the rest of your life, and it's going to help you in your job, help you in your outside relationships, help you in your friendships, because you become cognizant of being kind, courteous, and polite.
I think this conversation about communication fits in very nicely with the one we will have next week, focusing on conflict resolution, because you guys can tell us next week. I don't think you can separate the two. I think they're always likely to go hand in hand. Maybe there are some conflicts that have nothing to do with communication, but they're not popping into my mind right away. So as our final send off for this week, what do you want listeners to take home with them as far as maybe a communication improvement idea?
It is that 15 minutes of uninterrupted conversation. There's no question. And next week, we will give you a couple of phrases that will be able to be used when you're having conversation and it's not quite going right. But having that consistent, every day, We're putting a piece of paper on the trust pile, and that trust pile grows every day because we're taking the time to trust each other and communicate. So carve it out, make it an appointment like you would make an appointment for a Zoom call or for a dentist appointment. Every day at 7:15, before we wake up the kids, we're going to take 15 minutes over a cup of coffee or whatever time works into your schedule. That is what we'd really like to take away as far as becoming better communicators.
A good note on which to end. A quick reminder to everybody that every episode of Marriage Talk that we've ever done is available on the website for free at marriagetalk.org. And as we continue moving forward with Jay and Laura, we're adding to that library every single week. And don't forget, you can also watch all of these conversations on the all-new Marriage Talk YouTube channel. So if you ever want to wonder what three faces made for radio look like, I should
two are made for radio.
I was going to say thank you. I should take
one is so pretty when she smiles, Bill. She's so
you.
pretty when she smiles.
Thank you for bailing me out there of an egregious error. And on that note, we'll sign off. See you all next week with another episode of Marriage Talk.